If you're looking for a getaway this winter for rejuvenation and transformation, join Psychedelics today for our Vital Retreat at Blue Osa in Costa Rica. Blue Osa is an eco-resort that's all about harmony with nature. It's nestled between the jungle and the beach and primarily runs on solar power. And included in your Vital journey are 8 days and 7 nights accommodation, 4 transpersonal breathwork sessions, 2 as a breather and 2 as a sitter, 3 farm-to-table meals per day, and you'll also receive a $50 gift certificate for the on-site Blue Osa spa so you can indulge in some relaxation. Spend your free time taking a dip in the natural pool, exploring miles of secluded jungle beaches, and experience guided birdwatching hikes at sunrise. Stay active with daily yoga, intuitive movement, and CrossFit practices to keep your body and mind in sync. There's also free Wi-Fi if you wish to stay connected. Your group airport transportation is also included, making it a hassle-free adventure. So if you're ready to reconnect with nature, yourself, and other like-minded healers and professionals, join us this January 6th through 13th, 2024. Visit psychedelicstoday.com/events and scroll down to the Costa Rica retreat page for more info.
Are you working in psychedelics or taking steps to get involved? Lately, we've been thinking about the future of this field, the people who are going to work with psychedelics, and how they're going to show up. So we decided to ask them. Here's what we heard from people in a new survey who are working in psychedelics right now or preparing to launch their careers. 87.6% have been influenced by their own positive experiences with psychedelics. While 47% are incorporating psychedelics into an existing career, 31.6% are switching careers entirely. And not surprisingly, making money is not the goal. A staggering 98.3% of respondents indicate that making a lot of money is not their primary motivation to enter the field. If you're curious to learn more about this growing space and perhaps find your place in it, we're inviting you to download our new 24-page report, The Emerging Psychedelic Workforce. It's packed with insights on the field you won't find anywhere else, and it's completely free. You can find it in the articles section of our website at psychedelicstoday.com/article titled The Emerging Psychedelic Workforce.
Hey everyone, David here. I'm sure you've noticed that every passing year, psychedelics are becoming more accepted into mainstream culture, and many people all over the world are asking themselves, how can I get the foundational knowledge and skills to build a meaningful career in psychedelics? Well, that is exactly where Vital comes in. Vital's our 12-month multidisciplinary psychedelic practitioner training program. It's deeply comprehensive, inclusive, and most of all, transformative, both personally and professionally. Our graduates have gone on to do many wonderful things in the psychedelic space, and here are 6 real examples of what some of our alumni did with their Vital experience. Opened up a ketamine therapy clinic, got accepted for a Ph.D. about ayahuasca, built a retreat center, launched an entheogenic church, started their own coaching and wellness practice, and launched a psychedelic media and merchandise platform. So if you are feeling the call to join this movement, you need to apply before December the 20th. Classes start January 23rd. Please head to vitalpsychedelictraining.com to download our full course curriculum, check out our teaching team, and receive your application form. You can also check out our events page at psychedelicstoday.com to sign up for an upcoming Vital Q&A session or join an expert-led topical taster webinar. Find out whether Vital is the transformative journey that you've been looking for. Hello everybody, welcome to Psychedelics Today. This is David having a conversation with Shauheen Etminan and Lu of VCENNA and of Magi, which we're going to hear loads about. And I'm really looking forward to just learning more about who you are and what you're working on. So before we dive in, just let's do a little check-in, guys. Where are you holding in life and where are you in the world? Maybe Shauheen, do you want to check in first?
David, thank you so much for having us, and hello to your the Psychedelic Today's listeners. It's a pleasure for us to join you on today's podcast. Yeah, I'm joining from Vancouver, Canada, with my co-founder John And yeah, and we're happy to have a good conversation for today.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks so much, David. I'm calling in from the San Francisco Bay Area. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and we always love talking, especially with our engaged, conscious community, about a topic that's near and dear to our own hearts. It's a true passion project that we've begun to really help spread the word about an ancestral practice that we wish that more of the world knew about.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about our ancestral lineages. And maybe I'll just start there. How about that? So taking a deep breath into our ancestors that we all have, every human being in the world, we're standing on their shoulders. They are within us, our DNA, in our soul, and the roots of our being. So what ancestors are you connected to? And how do they help you? And how are they expressed in the work that you're both doing?
Well, maybe I start very quickly. Yeah, I was born in Tehran, Iran. or Iranian, and I'm coming from from that region called Middle East today, but it was just wider Iran and China and the region that are kind of like connected in between. Living in diaspora for about 20 years is always this adjustment between the two world is fascinating. But at the same time, as you said, we all have ancestors, and we get the wisdom in our body, through how we live, and we just have to connect to that. So yeah, I guess if I can bring and channel some of those knowledge, that's exactly the intention of what we are doing in Magi with John. And maybe I'll leave it to John to take it from there.
Yeah, so I'm an immigrant to this country here. I'm Chinese, originally from Taiwan, where I spent my early life. And what really puzzled me is, especially as an immigrant that's been trying to balance between two worlds, growing up in two different cultures here, and trying to, in later parts of my life, and embrace a little bit of what are the best parts and what are the worst parts that I've come to manifest that are a result of my own upbringing and my own heritage. A lot of my question as I went through this discovery here was a common thread that we see throughout culture of common or of different cultures following their ancestral worship in religious settings, as well as in the use of plant-based medicines, particularly psychoactive plant-based medicines, to reach a deeper level of enlightenment. And it always puzzled me from my own heritage, why has Eastern Asia been left out of this conversation? Like, are we so special or different that we never use them? And of course, the answer was no. There was a very rich, profound use of it, largely that through terminology, we might use different words, for example, mind-altering instead of psychedelic, but also largely because they have been forgotten and purposely forgotten as a part of history in order to move forward with what we might today call as progress. And it's something that I don't want to personally forget.
And maybe to be a bit personal, I'd love to know, within your identities, within your experiences of embracing your ancestors and your roots, have there been times where it didn't seem relevant, or you didn't want to belong to that and you wanted it to kind of go off separately? And what's that kind of process been like, bringing your traditions, your inheritance into life through your work and through kind of the wisdom that you're kind of making happen through Magi? And I'm coming from the perspective as a Jewish man who, for a lot of my year, I ran away from it as far and as fast as I could. I tried, but it would always be there, so I could never get away from it. So, in my late 20s, early 30s, I was like, oh, fucking hell, all right, I need to come back to this. It's still there. Like, I think this might be who I actually am, So what's that journey been like for you, at kind of embracing, exploring, rejecting those parts of yourself?
Yeah, amen, David. I think you are and I are in the same thread there, as I spent a lot of my youth also trying to run from my own heritage, my own culture, and trying to adapt and assimilate towards what might be more socially accepted, or at least what might be more socially accepted within my own mind. And now that, like, great Mark Twain quote, like, when I was 17, my father was the most ignorant man alive, and then when I was 21, I couldn't believe how much he had learned in just 4 years. It's like, as we grow and as we age here, I've come to realize a lot of my own habits, a lot of my own practices, a lot of the way that I am, things that I'm proud of about myself, and things that I wouldn't say I'm necessarily proud of myself, but I know that I can't change and they're inherent in who I am. They come from my own cultural upbringing. They come from this, very hard, disciplined, structured environment where I grew up in of having to excel and being defined based upon my achievements and my actions, not necessarily having this value of intrinsic worth that American optimism instills with us. And a lot of that's been part of my own journey of growth as I mature as an adult, and particularly as I've become a father and recognized there have been some balances and strengths from the way that I was raised. And are there ways to imbue those values into my children without giving them the same trauma that I went through? And to be honest with you, I don't really know that question, and that's part of what I'm still trying to venture to figure out as a human.
Yeah, and I guess when it comes to Iran, the main kind of like sense or feeling that comes up is confusion, and confusion around specifically because it's a very rich culture that comes with mysticism of 1,000 years and poetry and architecture, and everybody, like every Iranian, is inherently very proud of all of those. But at the same time, in the past 40-45 years, they have been dealing with a situation that's not the real representative of who they are, but they haven't also been able to have those soft skills to be able to mobilize the situation in toward embracing that identity. So I kind of like I'm one of those diaspora that kind of have spent like half of my life to about my like 2021 in Iran. I've gone to school, high school, I've done my undergrad in Iran. I'm very familiar with the social progression and what's happening there, and I have been traveling because my mom and my family lives in Tehran. But at the same time, I'm also, I've lived in the West and seen different folks of diaspora that they call themselves Iranian American or Persian American, but they just want to like take something out of that culture. They have this inherent heritage proud, but at the same time, they are not associating themselves with Iran because Iran doesn't look like a good, this doesn't look good, on news or on the paper. So I think this separation or this segregation is what specifically with the age of psychedelics or the psychedelic renaissance, we can go through many of those traumas that have created this segregation and then see what can be done for integration of who we are as a whole, as an Eastern, Western, or global citizen rather than just like being Western or Eastern.
Beautiful. And yeah, just to mention what you were saying at the beginning, that in the psychedelic renaissance, a lot of attention is going, towards South America in particular, and maybe, Africa with Iboga. And I haven't seen so much coming from China and Iran until I saw what you guys are working on. So maybe tell us a bit about what you are working on. So, how did you guys come to meet and work together and come up with, the vision?
Absolutely. John and I met each other in 2018 through a very different time, and I was working on a different startup, and John was coaching us in a cohort, and I was very lucky to connect at that point based on like what I was working on and like the way that I was trying to bring that product into market. And but I guess what kept us connected was basically our fascination for biohacking, interest in any like brain health or basically just brain hacking mostly. And through that, I guess it was kind of like my early time with experiencing ayahuasca, and I actually introduced John to one of the circles, and that I basically sat with in California, and that was kind of like the how our friendship kind of like got a little bit deeper, but like we were disconnected for a while. But in 2021, I reached out to him. I was already working on a plant extraction company, VCENNA. And I guess when John joined, we kind of like embarked on our journey toward drug discovery. And since then, we have been working together.
And so started with VCENNA, and when did Magi get born, and what's its kind of its mission and vision?
Yeah, maybe I'll step in there with some of how the two are really related. When we began going through the drug development pathway, given our common interest in biohacking, and particularly a lot of this quantified self, what we really were looking for is how can we translate this phenomenological effect of the different psychedelic experiences that people encounter, and how can we do our best to try and quantify them in order to map that back to figure out what's the right level of dosage, what's the right bioavailability, what's the right compound to be used for each different use case. When we stopped going down that pathway and launched the supplement using all non-scheduled and fully legal products that we could be able to sell on the market, we kept that same drug development methodology, testing really on ourselves in a way, I guess, inspired by Shauheen or some of the early ancestors who also just consumed plants by themselves and would document what happened. We had some modern day tools in terms of being able to measure our brain waves through EEG, measure things like heart rate, respiratory rate, skin temperature, galvanic skin response, and we sought to really quantify as we start mixing different compounds together. What happens as we start changing the different ratios, we start changing the different dosage, as we start changing our different environments? What is the effect, and how can we start mapping the effect that we can measure within our bodies and our minds to our own experiences? And that's really how all our products have been born today. It was from this unique combination of taking some of the different plant extracts that we have that are really indigenous to the regions that we come from and have been used in our own ancestral history, and figuring out the right dosage and ratio for how we mix them together in order to get the desired effect upon our brain waves or physiological metrics that we're looking for that can provide some certain benefits. And then, of course, verifying that with some kind of human experimentation to make sure that what we see on paper with all the math matches up with the desired sensation that we're trying to also deliver.
I love the emphasis on the data, and well done for experimenting on yourselves, guys. You both look okay and seem okay so far. So yeah, I'd love to hear, how did they affect you? Like, what kinds of products were you using? What kinds of plants? What kind of scientific process were you going through to kind of hack and tweak? And what did you notice around kind of the outcomes on your kind of physical, neurological, biological functioning?
Yeah, maybe I'll turn it over to Shauheen here, because really the core kind of hero plant behind all of our work here has been Paganum harmala, or espand, sometimes known as Syrian Rue, where we were really interested in the beta-carbolines that are extremely rich in this plant, the same ones that you would find within Banisteriopsis caapi or the yake vine of ayahuasca, except in a plant that has a really deep-rooted tradition in Persian and Iranian history, and is also not with any of the ecological damage or concerns that we have to worry about with something like yahe. So maybe we'll start there and turn that over to Shauheen.
Yeah, I guess so. The journey started with basically experimenting with different alkaloids extracts. So we were able to extract these compounds from different plants. Specifically, the journey started with just like doing some experimentation with psilocybin, just like looking into what are those alkaloids inside psilocybin mushroom, and basically the story took us into our own heritage and trying to see what are other plants that are psychoactives, but they're less studied in the West, and but they have a heritage in like basically in our background. This is actually one of those areas that I can say that when you see there is kind of like a forgotten knowledge, and you don't really feel that like the knowledge can be really obscured or forgotten like this, but there has been the pioneering work of two scholars that they wrote a book about 40 years ago, basically about Haoma and harmaline. And Haoma is this psychoactive potion that has been referred to in the Zoroastrian, basically text, that the Zoroastrian priests or Magi, who were basically they were in participating in shamanic practices before even Zoroaster, and then they were kind of like the patron of Zoroaster during when he came out with his teaching, that they were taking this psychoactive substance to have otherworldly journeys or to have access to the realm of after death. But what was the botanical identity of Haoma is the subject of speculation for about 200 years. So this is specific work that is actually done about 40 years ago and kind of been silent since then is looking into Pegonum harmala, espand, or Syrian Rue as the main active compounds in Haoma. And it's kind of like that was the, the ignition for us, to look into this plant, because it's very widely available in every Iranian's houses. And it's very interesting because Iranians, they burn it, for its smoke. And the idea is just to kind of revert the evil's eye, and you find it in every Iranian's house, not only the Zoroastrians, every Iranian's house. And like, even if you go to California, there are selling those in stores that basically is like, yeah, it's just like for burning it, and then it bursts, and then there's this like white smoke coming out of it. But I doubt that like Iranians know that it's a very, heavy psychoactive and hallucinogenic substance. And so this is something that's been lost, over time. But just like this scholarly work, plus the fact that now is kind of, there's more knowledge and science coming around, ayahuasca and the components of ayahuasca, which actually one of the main group of compounds is beta-carbolines. So bringing all of these together kind of like put us on this path to continue, and then basically just get to where we are today.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about beta-carbolines in a second here, but as we think about the ancestral usage for how they were using it, the Zoroastrian priests or the Magi, they would burn it as an incense, and they would get their dosage, if I were to call it that way, effectively just by breathing it in, insufflation. Their approach of how they would do a journey was really a deep meditation. And that's actually a lot of the effect that we found ourselves when we began playing around with different alkaloids and self-supplementing them, is that as opposed to a microdose that people will generally take to focus, this is something that we found really helps us to unfocus, which is not great if you're trying to go do work or write a great term paper or do a bunch of financial analysis. But it's really perfect if you're actually trying to meditate and reach this deeper state where you can calm that anxious, loud mind that's screaming at you. In higher doses, it's certainly much more effective. But in the dose for where we've made our first product, it's really inspired by this idea of taking something to help you reach a deeper level of meditation, because everything really intrinsically is where we find our own insight.
And yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? That you're saying it works well for things like meditation, more of a spiritual kind of internal exploratory perspective. And I know from folks that have used Syrian Rue, they describe it as having, quite a godly energy to it. There's some people I know in the Jewish world here that are saying it has like a masculine energy similar to one of the names of God, Elohim, and it kind of comes from where physically the plant grows. So I'm interested, to what extent do you feel like the plants that you're using, and we can start with Haoma, Peganum, Hamala, to what extent do they carry with them, even in Vancouver and San Francisco, the energy of the land from which they come from? Maybe archetypes and energies and visualizations and sensations. Because from what I've heard of other people using other medicines away from, say Peru using ayahuasca, they could be in New York City, and they still have visualizations of a puma, and that energy and that the being, the entity that comes to them is from the medicine, from the land of its ancestry, rather than from New York City. So what does it feel like is happening with the plants that you're using?
I think that effect is coming from the fact that like you take the whole full spectrum of the plant, and it's exactly like when you are, for example, brewing, the beta carbon coming out of Streptococcus copy bark, like there is no separation of different alkaloids. So most of our study in Magi has been based on extracting basically the active compounds out of espand or Syrian Rue to very single molecules that are pure, or we call them APIs, and then recombining those for a repeatable experience. But I have never done a full dose of Peganum harmala myself, but I have talked to people who have done, let's say, 3 grams of the seeds, or they have done it with different compounds, and I would say that basically just exploring this realm of connecting with archetypes or other entities or other beings is, and then generalizing or at least communicating with each other to see if we are connecting to the same same entities or we feel the same energy. I guess this is a very interesting area. Specifically for me, it's interesting because a very similar lineage is coming actually from South America, which for 1,000 years they have continuously been connected to these archetypes. But if you come, for example, to Iran or that region, if they were exploring these connections to any type of archetypes or entities, there have been also a disconnection for 1,000 years. Like there are not even conversations. So if you talk to Zoroastrian, there's religion, like as religion, people who are following, there is no connection to any use of substance. There is still Haoma, but even the botanical identity of Haoma has changed, and there is no connection to any otherworldly beings or otherworldly energies. But yeah, I would say now if we are looking to explore that, this is something that has to come from more collective and sharing, of people. But uh, we would say, yeah, specifically like Pegonum harmala compounds, even though they are beta-carbolines, if you compare them with Banisteriopsis copy, they have different range of beta-carbolines, which I guess physiologically what happens is that you're kind of like tapping into a different channel, of connection, I would say.
And coming to the products that you've got through Magi, I understand they're not DEA scheduled, so they have that GRAS, generally regarded as safe status. So does that mean you can or can't call them supplements?
Yeah, I guess we call them supplements. They are nootropic supplements because they are working on cognitive functions, and they are at low doses. The doses that we started with, the microdose, the sub perceptive, and mini dose, we should call them sub intoxicating. So you feel the effect. Like a sub perceptive, you don't really feel the effect, but for our mini doses, which are sub intoxicating, you have this experience of about 1 hour. You feel the effect, and but it's very safe. At least for most of the people that they have tested and we have received feedback. Some they have some feel like, yeah, kind of like this. Always there is intra-patient variability, but generally it's safe, and like even in terms of regulatory, it's also basically counted as safe. Plus, I guess I should add this as well. Like before taking this to market, we have done also a very thorough, third-party toxicology study that just like allowed us to find what are those thresholds, in terms of dosing, which is counted as safe. So this is also come with the product.
So if taken as the bottle says at that dose, what kinds of experiences would people have? And I know you've got a few different products, so feel free just to talk through them. On a literal level, kind of why would someone use them? When would they use them? What circumstances? What time of the day? Kind of thing.
Yeah. John, do you want to go with this?
Or sure. Yeah, so we talked about our meditation aid starred. That one there is really focused upon a specific ratio of beta-carboline alkaloids that we've extracted from espand, together with some other extracts that we found, like particularly there's a tannin that we found in grapefruit that really helps to improve bioavailability, and some of the antioxidants that are found within pomegranate we found also actually help to improve bioavailability. So in that product, really the key components are the beta-carbolines that will help you feel this. The word starred means to spread, from the ancient Avestan language, and really helps you to feel this mind spreading to kind of calm down your inner psyche and your inner voice, so you can be present with yourself. That's the one that you'll most feel among our mini doses. Our other mini dose is one that we call Mang, our lucid dream aid. That one is actually a very interesting one, my personal favorite product, I should say, but one that I personally can't take more than about twice per week, because I just find it a little overwhelming to have this level of vivid dreams where I'm just not exactly able to integrate them all. But that one is not just the beta-carbolines from espand. That was from a kind of a serendipitous combination that we found in combination with a Chinese plant that's known as Chengseng Ta. That literally translates to the Tower of 1,000 Steps, which has this kind of dual meaning because the plant itself resembles a Buddhist pagoda, but it's also one that had been used for a long time by a lot of the Taoist sages, that they would spend their times escalating the steps to a cave and meditating for weeks upon end, and oftentimes taking this plant here in their meditative journey. We have found that from a very unique combination of these two together, they really have a profound impact on the high frequency gamma brain wavelengths when you reach the REM stage 4 stage of sleep, which is exactly the phase where you have the most vivid, lifelike dreams. And that in turn also has been reflected in the experience that we find is that you may not necessarily feel it because you're meant to take this before bed and you'll be sleeping, but when you are sleeping, you will have very vivid and if not lucid dreams.
Yeah, I guess I want to add something to that. Like our flagship product at the start, which is our meditation supplement, and I guess one maybe a distinction, for the audience to kind of understand it better. So beta carbolines in general, they are dream inducing. Like this is the main effect, the kind of like behind most of what we have formulated. So this dream inducing or this dream like state is where our kind of like beta like beta brainwave, which is like when we are very analytics, kind of like gets like a little bit slow, and then what happens is that we are able to get into kind of like theta state, which is kind of like when you fall asleep, but at the same time you are awake in that sleepy zone. So kind of like you're dreaming, but you are awake in that dreaming, so you're able to go through things. And so the other side of this, which is kind of like you're awake when you are in when you are falling asleep, is exactly our mang, which is our lucid dreaming supplement, which that process happens when you are kind of like you are bringing your beta again, kind of like consciousness into a theta, like where you're actually dreaming actively. And that's how we have kind of created a product, for like awake, like basically for dreaming when you're awake versus like when being present when you are asleep. So kind of like the zone is the same zone, so we are tapping into another layer of consciousness, which is mostly the unconscious, so something that we have no information about. And that allows us kind of like to receive awareness and knowledge through a different pathway, which that has been what like kind of like related to what most of the mystics have been practicing over time, to kind of like sharpen their intuition and their like the tools to receive knowledge and awareness about the outside world.
Beautiful. I love what you just said, Shauheen. That's fascinating. And thinking about psychedelics having, a profound impact on our consciousness, touching and kind of diving into the unconscious. Often we're talking about macro doses, and it's that kind of a massive bang kind of into the outer reaches of the of the galaxy. But actually, the realms have a very thin veneer between them. We are constantly living in them, and our body is perpetually alive with multiple realms, kind of functioning. And lower doses, the more psycholytic, like how ketamine is used in psychotherapy, help us to touch, that unconscious level. And dreaming totally does that as well. Meditation, like all the things you're saying there. So I'm loving that what you're talking about. Those products can really help us with meditation, with sleep, with dream. But I wonder if they could also help with psychotherapy in a more like psycholytic model. If, say, I was going to find the right dose for me and then go and have a session with my therapist, and it would really help me do some integration work from a psychedelic trip, or maybe it just help me do some great therapy in general.
Yeah, we are just as curious as you to determine that that scientific or medical approval in order to find that. Kind of brings you back to an original point you had here when you would question, do we call them supplements? And there's this terminology you put between what is a supplement, what is a drug, what is food. Even going back to what Andrew Weil talks about here, like, is caffeine a drug? Is nicotine a drug? We generally would think about that as yes. Is something like sugar a drug? It certainly is psychoactive, has profound changes upon your body's physiology. Like these words that we apply to what is a drug versus what is a supplement are fairly arbitrary. We give the label of something as being a drug just because it's gone through the medical establishment of 1,000 people have tested it, and based upon the evaluation of a guy wearing a white lab coat with a diploma on the wall, he said that more than 65% of them were versus those who were given a placebo had a positive response, and therefore I can call it a drug now instead of a supplement. You can make a medical claim, but the plants, the compounds, they don't really care what we call them.
Yeah,
in this respect here, we can't actually make that claim about how can it be used clinically in order to help with a treatment itself. That would be very valuable data to have, but in the absence of having a bunch of guys in lab coats with diplomas on the wall saying we've tested this in a couple of thousand people with positive responses, that's the way that people have been using them for thousands of years.
Yeah, I would say, I guess one other thing I would want to add to what John said is it doesn't really matter if it's supplement, what the classification of today's world, we call it, but I guess what brings it to be therapeutic, let's say, to be used with psychedelic psychotherapy or kind of in the realm of psychiatry, is the fact that I guess from one side is kind of like in psychedelics, we call for the placebo effect. So just putting intention, when you're taking another drug, you are not really like putting intention when you're taking it. But when you with psychedelics, when you put intention, you already kind of like program your brain for the expected therapeutic effect. I guess this is one big area which probably if you take it with a stomachic, let's say medication, that may do the same thing. I guess the other part is actually about the process. I guess as we go more forward about how we have to go through, like, for example, previously with most of the psychiatric drugs, like you are just prescribed this drug and then you take it and you expect, something is changing, and it changed because your brain chemistry changes and your behavior, you become another person. For example, when you're under an antidepressant. But I guess with psychedelics, I guess what we see more and more in the coming years, my understanding is that because we understand how the brain is reacting to this, and there is this timeline, like an early time, late time, in terms of, let's say, the episodic memory, how you're, for example, going to like unlearn and relearn something. So it's all about how along the process you are kind of exposing yourself to what you want to go through, and that is the therapeutic promise that comes out of taking psychedelics. So at this point, we're just talking about, it's very simplified at this point. Simplification is like you're taking this and then there's the integration and everything is happening in the integration part. But I guess then this becomes more rigorous for each and every different psychoactives, that, for example, after taking this like 1 hour, you have to bring on what you want to think about, let's say, as this new belief or new reality that you want to manifest in your life. It kind of like you're cooperating with your brain along the way that you are under the effect. And I guess that is something that I see that it becomes more and more rigorous. I'm not sure how in terms of regulatory and it's going to work, because the DSM manual is just like there are just like 1, 2, 3 symptoms and then they are just prescribing this versus that. But I hope that changes over time, because disorder is also a definition that we are kind of like put into a word, because like most of the people are like that, the rest are called as a disorder. But yeah, I guess I would say with psychedelics, what we see is that over time the whole DSM manual would change.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. I know the DSM gets quite a lot of criticism, much of it rightly so. And I think so much of the psychedelic world focuses on a lot of the mental health addiction conditions that definitely need some better treatments developed from what we've had over the last few decades. And at the same time, there's so much to be said, not for pathologizing and correcting deficits, not even healing trauma, but for enabling someone to have just a more intimate relationship with themselves, with their body, with their energy, with their consciousness, with their spirit. And that's a lifelong daily practice. So I really like how we're talking about this, Shauheen, that in a sense, it makes me think that we can use these products and we can develop whatever practices that we have in our life, whether it's meditation, journaling, certain kind of diet and exercise, relationships, groups we belong to, psychotherapy that we get. These are all kind of instantaneous revelations of who I am, who I need to be, what I need to figure out, and how I need help kind of expressing and exploring. And that's just an endless thing. And I love that, in a sense, part of the whole biohacking, consciousness hacking, nootropic, message is we are the experts ourselves. And that's quite scary because we're used to other people being the expert, telling me, what shall I do? How much do I take? What's this thing called again? But, for us to know, oh yeah, this is what it is. This is what it does. This is what it's made of. This is how it affects me. Let's try it an hour later after breakfast, or let's try it before breakfast, or let's try it late at night. Let's do some meditation. Or let's go for a swim, or let's, that real unique relationship that we're building with exploring and revealing parts of ourselves. And I feel like it's this kind of hacking of consciousness, our bodies and spirit that is super empowering and kind of decentralized in how we need to move and go back to as a society. Yes, we have elders and kind of wise teachers. That's much needed, desperately so nowadays. But also we really need to step into that ourselves, like that we really need to know ourselves and be in the driving seat, invested in and accountable to, exploring and revealing ourselves.
Yeah. I guess is what I see that specifically with psychedelics is coming forward is this quest for support from 1,000 years of this experimentation. So it's kind of, I guess, the effect is so immense that digesting it without tapping into what our ancestors has done over, let's just say, 1,000 years is not that easy, because it comes from every lineage that, like, we have the universe inside us, we have all the knowledge inside us. I remember a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I was always I was just like, I didn't understand this. Like, what does that mean that you have the universe inside you? Like, even like looking into what Rumi's like poems are talking about, or Hafez, or like many of the mystics around the world. But now that I'm actually learning more and more about shamanic practices, it's interesting because there are two distinctions for any shamanic practices. One is actually like using psychoactive substances to tap into other realm of consciousness, and then the second distinction is the idea of having a double soul. So that means that, like, there is this body, there is this kind of like tangible physical manifestation of who we are, but at the same time that kind of has been glued to like our kind of like astral body, which is that astral body has no limitation to time, to space. Like, you can't, that's where actually we feel the unity. So that's why when people are taking psychedelics, they feel that, like, that you're all one. Like, you always see that people are saying that, yeah, I felt that I'm one with the trees, with other people, with other people inside the ceremony. But where that does come from is actually the fact that we have all the knowledge within us, but for us to have access to that is how we can safely access to the realm of unconscious, where all the knowledge is actually stored and present. And for that we need to have a very I guess this is actually coming from our different lineages, that you have to come with reverence, you have to come with respect, and then you have to come with kind of curiosity and integration, because otherwise the other side is actually psychosis. Like, you're exposed to something that you don't have the capacity to digest it. That is this very fascinating to see that how all of, like, even though they've been like very disconnected at time, let's say 3,000 years ago, South America from Middle East, or from, let's say, like Egypt or Europe, but they were kind of like going through the same realization that the path to having access to a wider knowledge is coming through us, and some of these psychoactive substances is the way that they could kind of facilitate the access. I want to like also like open a little bit about beta-carbolines in when, like, maybe like a little bit later, but this denominator specifically with beta-carbolines is interesting, because just recently, about maybe a month ago, a paper came out that was basically just like the mass analysis of the remainder of like a potion, coming from Egypt, like ancient Egypt, that they had just kind of like gone through mass spectrometry to see like what different alkaloid was in the, basically what was left. And again, actually, it was interesting. They found Syrian Rue in that cup, and they also found water lily, or blue lotus. So to me, that was very interesting, because then you see that there was in Iran, there were kind of like Syrian Rue or espand or peganum harmala was being used there. It was being used in ancient Egypt, and it was being used, in Mesoamerica, South America, which kind of like they all had this, mystical, practices to find a way to tap into, to higher wisdom or higher consciousness.
And I think we should mention cannabis as well has been used for probably millennia all around the world. Is that something that you've found in Iran, Persia, and
Absolutely.
in China? Has cannabis been used in the old days?
Yeah,
Yeah, in
absolutely.
Iran,
Actually, I think it was the Turkish that originally had the mixture of Syrian Rue or Peganum harmala together with cannabis. And of course, like in traditional Chinese medicine history, cannabis, known as dama, it's one of the 50 most important plants as a medicine, and as actually a staple crop for food as well. So yeah, it's also very interesting if you look at all these ancestral traditions. They're very different from this concept of this, one drug, one compound. We need to find the one target that can cure you if you just doesn't do this one thing. Like, there was never a concept of side effects in any of our Eastern traditions. It's always mixing stuff together, and what you get, that's supposed to be the effect.
Yeah, different recipes.
Yeah, and I guess in Iran specifically, it was like before Islam, which was during the Zoroastrian, pre-Zoroastrian time, which Haoma was the psychoactive, and Haoma was a potion. Haoma was not like there's called a plant Haoma, but Haoma was actually a potion. It was always a mixture of different compounds. It was a mixture of beta-carbolines. It was a mixture of some of the deliriants. For example, Mang, which is the name of one of our supplements, actually coming from a potion that had black hembane or scopolamine, atropine products in that potion. But like kind of like with the conquest of Iran through like the Islam, which kind of like end the Zoroastrian time in Iran, and then the years later, you see that like substances also change. So kind of like during the, let's say, Sufism time, like before Safavid dynasty, so they were kind of like, that's the time that even the definition of, it's interesting, Mang, the definition, the Mang or Bang, let's say, it was black hembane to about like 12th century. And after 12th century, Mang or Bang become Bang, which is the name of cannabis. So even the name is the same, but the identity of the plant changes. And then that's the time that the hashish or kind of cannabis was very widely used. And I would say like from my perspective, I see that Iran has gone through different plant over, a timeline of the time, that like even kind of recently opium, is what kind of like during, for example, like Pahlavi time or recent, the opium was the drug in Iran, which was kind of because there's a lot of opium being cultivated in Afghanistan. So, but it's very interesting how the consciousness of a nation, or like not a nation, just like people of that region is changing over time with exposure on two different plants and different psychoactives.
It's great, isn't it, to think about history, the movement and migration of people, civilizations, empires, and they bring with them their jewelry, their traditions, their language, their mathematics and astronomy, and their drugs, and their spiritual, mind-altering, consciousness-altering, spiritual enhanced kind of nootropics and psychedelics. It's phenomenal just to think about how humanity has evolved over thousands of years. And we probably don't know. Like, I know there's a little bit more kind of archaeological chemistry happening around the world, trying to dig things up and test certain samples to see what did ancient peoples use in their temples and, in their kind of meeting places. But yeah, it's beautiful in many respects, but one respect particularly, and I'd like to focus on that, of what it represents for where we are now, humanity now. in the year 2023, because in a sense it represents a contemporary sharing and blending and learning through the internet and podcasts and, of spiritual wisdom and of the need to heal, and of a shared collective trauma that somehow we need to get through the other side of. And right now we're going through a psychedelic renaissance, and we're starting to become more conscious of our bodies, our souls, and so I think we could see what we're going through right now is a rapid kind of evolution of what we have done over centuries and millennia around sharing of traditions, but sharing of consciousness evoking medicines as well. So I guess there's a question, especially where you're both from and your ancestors are both from, China and Iran. Those in particular, quite difficult places to live right now in some respects. I think the whole world has, enough to deal with, but particularly, Iran, and China, there's a lot happening there. And I don't know if you've connected with what this means for you personally, for the people that are there, and for the whole world, that we're going through this, kind of psychedelic anthropological awakening right now.
Yeah, David, you bring up a really interesting point here. And in my ventures as an amateur ethnopharmacologist here, as I studied across various cultures across the world, from China, Europe, Eurasia, the Americas, it's been this kind of common thread from all of the early use of mind-altering substances, where originally the shamanic use was meant for for healing, for social cohesion, reverence, for recollection of our ancestors. This ability to help give a group purpose, as we were these disparate tribes trying to come together and form communities. And as all those communities begin to advance, then it naturally leads to this kind of top-down level of, there's a threat towards our social order and our concern. We need to begin restricting them and regulating them. And I would actually argue that we've now reached this point here that while our population densities have increased so much, we're kind of back to that original place where we were thousands of years ago. With, again, we have this need for healing. We have this lack of social cohesion. We have a kind of a data overload. We have this knowledge shortfall. We almost have this crisis of purpose that we all try to fill with something, regardless of which culture we're coming from. And kind of specific to China and my own upbringing here, of one that really values work and really values achievement and accomplishment. It's this concept that's known as a 996 culture. Like, whenever Chinese CEOs come over to see Silicon Valley entrepreneurs here, they always say, "Oh, you guys are so lazy. Like, what you work is nothing here." This 996 means that the average work week is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days per week. Like, that's kind of the standard. And I see it, and I can only speak from my own personal experience here, is a way to try and fulfill this need of purpose of what can I aspire to ensure that I'm accomplishing. Beneficial perhaps in some ways, but also highly, highly damaging and highly dramatic in other ways. And I think this is a lot of the reason why we're seeing this resurgence of ancestral practices, plant medicine, and reverential use for how can we help rediscover what our ancestors discovered long ago. Because we live in an environment with different threats, but we have the same needs as before, and a lot of the same issues and challenges before.
Beautiful. Thanks, John.
Something also I want to add to what John said, just looking this through history, you're kind of specifically when you do deep meditation about, just passing 1,000 years and just putting yourself in their shoes when they were kind of all separated. It was not like today that we can connect with each other this easy. Because what my realization is that over time, let's say when civilization grew and then people came to city, and then a kind of more social interaction came over. So what happened was that human was pushed more toward this thinking through beta kind of brainwave, which is your analytical side, versus the earlier human, they were kind of the brain was more on the there's kind of read that it was more on the alpha, which is kind of that unfocused zone. We were in this realm of constant connection with the intuitive world, with just receiving from nature. Because we were exposed to less people around us, we were just living in nature. We always had this, downloads and intuition. But over time, with the complexities and regrets, the regrets, and basically just what came, as more complex with the civilization, was that a human was pushed toward becoming more analytics, in a way that you can just constantly think and analyze. But that came with separation. I guess this was the part that kind of it was inherently, kind of put into our body, but it came with separation. Previously, there were like we had practices as mass, but now we're trying to have practice as group of individuals. So kind of mass versus group of individual. The difference is that in mass there is a consciousness of the mass versus, let's say, a group of people that they are, let's say, sitting together in an ayahuasca ceremony, and then the next day they are just sharing their experiences with each other. But what I think is that just what we have to probably remove or try to reconcile is that sense of separation that was, kind of embedded into us through so many things, through, the understanding of like the resources were not like scarce now, and then the competition, etc. That like if we can overcome that, then there's no separation, there's no line or border about, let's say, the consciousness of this nation and that nation. There's just like this, there is this mass processing of consciousness that makes us, one individual, one species that, have this kind of like experience of oneness. Yeah, I guess this specifically with psychedelics and psychedelic psychotherapy is if we go through some of those traumas, I guess the first thing that comes out of trauma is the sense of separation, that we are different, we are better than the other, or we want things more than the other. And I hope that like as we go forward and psychedelics come kind of getting into more intertwined with mysticism, that is being achieved over time.
Really interesting to place what you were just saying around the default mode network. And for me, I'm thinking, what was the default mode network like 1,000 or 2,000 years ago? And I guess you're saying it might not have been there quite so strong. It might not have been that overbearing on us. And as our society's evolved, so has our default mode network, and just the style of our thinking and perceptualizing reality and habitualized nature of self. John, I want to ask you a question about a paper you've written that I just scanned over online. The paper was called Ethnopharmacology of Psychoactive Substances in Chinese Culture. Obviously something I know virtually nothing about, but there was one piece there that I found really interesting, and that was around the pictograms of the words that describe psychoactive plants, and how the shape of the words have meaning, and how they the shape of the word kind of build upon each other. Would you be all right just to explain to me and everyone else a little bit about that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Or I can certainly try. This is a hard thing to talk about without being able to show.
Yeah.
But if I put it to a really meta angle, and I'll try not to be too verbose with this here, I think the biggest thing that I've learned from a lot of my own journey is just how important communication is. Like these dumb, my 3-year-old or 4-year-old now could have told me this as well. It's important how we communicate, because we as our own conscious entities, the only way that I can express to you what my life is like, what my feeling is like, is with words, or with drawings, or with some movement. But the only way that we can ever know what another human being is trying to think or trying to feel or trying to act is through communication. And so much of Chinese history has been based upon written communication, much more than verbal communication, that really evolved from these hieroglyphic pictograms, exactly as you said. Everything is representative upon a diagram or a picture. So that being the long story behind it, the classic word for either poison or medicine, which has this both dual meaning, is known as du, which historically was written as this mixture of a plant on top, or the pictogram for a plant on top, and on the bottom was kind of a pictogram for what you might call to be like a bad person or an unkempt person. So it had this very like negative connotation of somebody holding a knife with a plant, which also represented like where we would get our medicines from. And then over time, that's begun to evolve a little bit as we went from, there's a couple of different forms of Chinese writing, this traditional and the simplified. As it was evolved to an easier form, that bottom pictogram evolved to something that looks a little bit more like mother. So if you were to combine the two together, this concept of du being a poison and also being something that is a potentially a potent medicine, as Paracelsus said, all poisons are medicines at the right dose. That is a different connotation where I would love to believe that over time there's been an intentional or at least some cultural significance about this poison that we feed into our bodies actually being something beneficial as medicine if taken the right way. Because exactly as Mother Nature has taught us and all our ancestors have tried to teach us, you don't just take this pill and get better. You don't just eat this plant and get better. Like it's trying to bring something in from within you that you need to put some intention towards. Whether it's I'm going to put ice on my leg or put a balm onto my leg, it's not just going to get better by itself. Your body's healing itself, and you're helping it. And our minds and our psyches are the same way. And I think that's reflective in the way that we write our words and the communication that we use, whether it's in the choice of how we write a Chinese translation of it, or even the English words that we use for describing our own experiences.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's really nice to think about medicine in that way, that it kind of might bring poison out of us, and it might require a challenging experience, especially spiritually speaking, kind of going through, that kind of challenging moment in life. I've got a few minutes left, guys. I really wanted to also ask Shauheen about the time you spent in the Amazon recently. What was that like? And what did you go over there for? Tell us as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the first thing was that I had no expectation. I guess I really, I went for the calling. It just came in 2 weeks, kind of with El Ponte, just suggesting, us to join, and we were I was very busy at the time. But when and honestly, I had no information about the Santo Daime Church, in terms of I knew that there were a certain way of doing ayahuasca, within the church, but I had never done it. But I guess aside from the fascination that just being exposed to the rainforest brings to you, for me, it just participating and being part of some of the Santo Daime ceremonies where they are kind of based and originated, was kind of eye opening in terms of the fact that we take ayahuasca mostly in the North American at least context in a very individualistic way. You kind of most of the ceremonies you're being served with a cup or two, and then just you're lying down, and the medicine is so heavy on your body that you're either purging or you're sick, but at the same time you're you are on your journey. But the first time that I learned that with Santo Daime Church, you are kind of on your feet and you're moving for 6-7 hours. It was very challenging. The first time we were a cohort of about 15 with El Ponte, and it came very challenging for all of us. The rhythm, of the songs are even faster, faster than your breath work, basically breath, and at the same time you just drink, and all the kids and men and women drink. It was just very, it was strange to see that kids also drink Santo Daime, basically Daime, and but to me, I guess the genius actually was from the fact that the founder of Santo Daime Church has brought this different elements of different religions, with the medicine of the indigenous people of those areas, Acre and Amazonas, together, to create this kind of a real moving cradle of mass consciousness processing. It's not a very individual experience. It's a very collective experience. And I guess with most of the experiences that we have now with psychedelics in the psychedelic realm, everything is very individual. People are asking, have you done MD5-MeO? Have you done this? Have you done that? You get that, and then you kind of you check with your friends how they have done this. But when they are doing Santo Daime, specifically, I would ask your listener to search it on YouTube. So you don't really feel that people are on their medicine. So they're very present, and you don't even think that they are really going through crazy thoughts. They're on a journey. They are they're just present as part of this this collective thing, which I guess there's some of the elements of just chanting and also moving on a rhythm kind of adds another element to the effect of ayahuasca or daime that allows you to, I guess at that point, nothing is individual anymore. And I guess for me, just that came through my second experience. And I realized that, like, I was just like watching some of the women, because women are chanting all the hymns. And I saw that like they were like, their eyes were closed, but they're still like having this move, like 2 steps to the right, 2 steps to the left. And I learned that, okay, now I just have to let go and just be in this movement. It's exactly like moving, like basically meditation in motion, like whirling or like just like swinging your head, when you are just going with the chanting or with the zikr, what Sufis do, that like that puts you in another, kind of telepathic state of mind that, you're open to receive. Yeah, I guess I would say I'm still like learning and reading about, different protocols, but at the same time, I think that the reason that people are, kind of coming to learn about, or to just like practice with Santo Daime is what they collectively experience versus just individually.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, and I just interviewed Celia Morgan from the University of Exeter, and she went to the Amazon to do some research, and she had a Santo Daime experience, and it was really similar experiences there. Sounds, phenomenal. And I love that you also brought in kind of the whirling dervishes as well, the similar kind of experience, body and mind, and being with others. And so as we're talking about, more macro doses there, in Brazil, I also wanted to just mention, from before we pressed record, you guys were saying there's a new product coming down the pipeline, literally kind of this weekend. It's the 7th of July right now when we're recording. So it's called Revelation Aid. I love how that sounds, Revelation Aid. So can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, when we launched Magi kind of late last year, we decided to go with like some more experimentation based on our clinical, and toxicology, preclinical, basically research. So we launched our sub-intoxicating and sub-perceptual formula, which they were like the products that we have on our website, but we kind of like we're a little bit hesitant about bringing something which is more like a macro experience. So this new product is called Haoma Revelation Aid, which is inspired by what basically the main potion of Zoroastrian time, which was called Haoma. And it has to be taken in the right set and setting, with the right intention. You have to be kind of like also be cognizant of your diet a little bit. So at least about 12 hours before taking it. And and the effect is kind of like, I guess for the audience to understand it better. So this is just a group of beta-carbolines with some of the other kind of like excipients that we have formulated together. So the effect is again very dream inducing. It's very heavy dream inducing that can kind of like, depending on how you are going through your journey, it can bring some hallucination as well. But it can take about 3 to 6 hours of like going through this. And just to compare or have some understanding, even in Amazon, like with people of like the east of Peru or west of Brazil, like the original yahe was the ayahuasca without chacruna leaves. So there was just the bark. So the bark does that effect that induce, the kind of like enrolls you into this like very heavy dream inducing state that, again, the doors of perception is open to you. Just like it's on you to kind of like dance with in this state with what you are receiving. But at the same time, so what happens is that like phenomenologically, the interpretation is like when you're in that dreamy state, what happens is that we cross through planes of consciousness, and that's how we receive a chunk of information immediately, instantaneously. Like that's where the revelation comes. That's where you have an epiphany. You have no knowledge, and all of a sudden you know about the whole thing. So this is the revelation is actually another way of gaining knowledge, which doesn't come through analytical, kind of like way or understanding, interpretation, etc. It's just like you're just present, and the awareness comes to you, but you just have to be able to position yourself and your brain and your physiology, and your consciousness to be exposed into that stage. Kind of the Haoma, actually, the revelation of Zarathustra came through a dreamy state under Haoma. So that was when he received this omniscient knowledge, which is all of a sudden he knew about the whole thing. He knew about everything. And that is the way that, like, I guess through the time, most of the mystic and sages have received the information. And the idea behind this macrodose is exactly the same thing. So it has to be done in the right set and setting and practice to be able to get maximum out of it.
There's part of what you're saying there around revelation and it having a spontaneous nature, that in a sense, I guess it's not this kind of linear, organic, sequential, chug along, that actually amongst the chugging along, there can be this kind of groundbreaking, consciousness shattering revelation. And I remember reading, some books, I can't remember who the author was, it might have been Graham Campbell, but it's talking about that on an individual level with individual revelation, but also societal revelation and societal reform, enlightenment, renaissance and revolution often happens not in a slow chug along, but in a quite spontaneous uprising, in a sense, of collective conscious. So I don't know if that's something you've ever thought about, Shauheen, but it just definitely pops into my head.
Yeah, like exactly like individual, we also have collective shadows, and they're saying that even collective shadows are more dangerous than individual shadows, because then everybody can just like touch a piece of it, right? Not the whole thing. So definitely, I would say, my understanding about this psychedelic movement is that like now everybody's kind of like they're doing their own moment. They take their own moment with the substance, but what comes in the next years is actually like this curated, well-intentioned, kind of collective experiences as a mass, again, not as a group of individuals, as a mass. Like you really want to give up to any separation. Like you want to, like, again, this realization, this epiphany is coming instantaneously for a group of people. It's exactly what I realized with the Santo Daime. Santo Daime was not individual; it was very collective. And yeah, no, I would say I would love to contribute to curating some of those spaces and experiences. And and I guess the best way is actually to curate that is through bringing some of these mystical practices from basically just lineages together, that always they have had a very, like, again, even in different lineage there is separation, right? But like if you just bring those together, and this realization and this human experience of like something bigger can be kind of like can occur, that would be life changing for everybody.
I love that you've mentioned it a few times now, actually, Shauheen, about the mass, the individual, the group, and the mass. In a sense, the collective, maybe the meta, all of us. And it particularly makes me think about, what we're seeing in the Middle East. So, I'm moving to Israel, and there's a conference coming up in Israel in December in the psychedelics world. Your ancestry's from Iran. They're not the best of friends, Israel and Iran, as we know. But, there's the Abraham Accords that have come out lately. And there was just a conference in Dubai where there were, I think, Rachel Yehuda, Jesse Gould, Marika Zan, and Maria as well, from Tabula Rasa, were talking about psychedelics. So they had a presentation and part of the conference talking about it in Dubai, which probably 5 years ago you wouldn't be able to do that. So we're thinking about the collective conscious here. We're thinking about kind of mass evolution, perhaps revolution. I think the idea of the Middle East, what is this? Who made up that word, the Middle East, anyway? Middle of what, But yeah, there's some great wisdom there. Very diverse peoples, and if psychedelics can help to bring peace there, and if that can be just a shared amount of wisdom between people collectively, wow, then we're making some pretty amazing progress. So yeah, I've got some big hopes, particularly for that part of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was always thinking that, like, driving from, I don't know, let's say Tehran to like any part of, let's say, to Mount Sinai, it's only like 20 hours. Like I have driven 20 hours from Canada to Burning Man a few times, like it's not a big deal, like you can't just like, but just today, if you think about it, let's just drive, like how many borders and how many probably, like crazy things may happen to you, because this is something that has to really come from, the change in the minds of the mindset, right? Like otherwise that niche, that kind of area is the area that like has experienced civilizations for 1,000 years and has to celebrate that connection with, with the all the development that we have had in the past, rather than kind of like the damages or ruins of what is left today from all the rivalries or separations that for different reasons. So yeah, I guess my approach to psychedelics is I would say is very pragmatic. I'm not very fascinated about psychedelics in general. I'm fascinated about the effect of psychedelics on human consciousness, because yeah, I guess we are really behind our capacity, and I would love to see that we come together with good intention in a way that we can pave that way, for fostering something that is serving everybody rather than just the group of people.
Amen. And yes, this is a remembering. We are not inventing something. This is something that humanity has lost, and we've always had a deep connection to nature, to plants, to entities, to energies, to the divine within us, and that we all share. So Shauheen, John unfortunately had to leave a few minutes back. That's why it's just the two of us riffing here. I've loved chatting. So, when I met you a few years ago in Miami at Wonderland, loved our connections. I try to give you a hug every time I walk by you. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you and John. So just to bring us home, tell us where we can find out about the websites that you've got, the kind of any other ways that people might want to get in touch with you folks.
Absolutely, yes. So the brand is called Magi, Magi, but if they want to search it, we go with Ancestral Magi, ancestralmagi.com, or Ancestral Magi on any social media. Like we are present on most of the social media channels. Yeah, just check us out. If you have any question, just send it to us. We're always like very diligent with answering everybody's question, because that also helps us learn and just like learn about like people's concerns. But at the same time, so these substances or these supplements that we are creating, they're all goes hand in hand with a practice. So the practice is the most important part, that it comes with commitment, it comes with intentions. So these are just like catalysts to enroll people into a meditation practice or into just like kind of processing wider consciousness. And in general, I guess the part that I really like is that like now we're talking a lot about hero's journey, like it's just going through the known to the unknown, the calling that comes. But hero's journey comes always with just jumping over, with changing job or like living your normal life. But with these practices, we can experience unconscious, we can experience the unknown every day, and then be more comfortable with that, rather than putting ourselves in a very difficult situation in life, let's say of being an entrepreneur with no payment, etc., or like all this leap of faith that we are taking. So I think taking leap of faith, just being exposed to unknown, this is something that also we can experience, we can practice, and then we can integrate into our daily life.
Sounds awesome. Yeah, I love the emphasis you're putting on that there. Thank you. All right. Thank you for being here, Shauheen. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Really lovely to chat with you.
David, thanks so much for having us and for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. See you soon. God bless everyone.